Information shared on the following program is for general information purposes only. It does not constitute legal, tax, investment, or other advice, nor is it intended to recommend any particular investments, products, or financial instruments. Always seek advice from your financial advisor, attorney, or accountant with regard to investment, legal, or tax questions.
Welcome to the only show in the country dedicated to helping savers worry less about money, the WorryFree Retirement, with your host, retirement specialist and six-time author and fiduciary, Tony Walker.
The mere thought of borrowing money from others to purchase things we sometimes don't need and having to pay them interest to boot can be worrisome at best. Now, before I start railing on you about debt like those financial entertainers on the radio and the internet, let me say this. In working in the field of finance for over 40 years, I have discovered that there are times when debt is good and times when the use of debt is bad. You see, when it comes to planning for a worry-free retirement, the issue is not just debt, but something called cash flow, which in layman's terms simply means that the money coming in your front door must equal or exceed the money heading out the back door. And if debt can keep less money from going out the back door, then it's good debt. However, if it increases the flow of money heading out the back door with no way to create more money coming in the front door, well, just like our nation with over $38 trillion in debt, you and I have got a problem. Which is why today I'm going to cover the issue of debt and when debt can make sense in retirement and when it may not. Because as much as there is to figure out with this thing called retirement, the lack of savers, and yes, most advisors, having a basic understanding of cash flow is the reason most folks cannot make correct decisions about debt and whether it makes sense in retirement or if it does not. But never fear, because today I'm going to do something no advisor has ever done before, and that's share with you my vast experience in meeting in person with over 20,000 savers and how we at Tony Walker Financial can assist retirees with an understanding of good debt versus bad debt, and how our written game plans and experienced staff can help savers determine if when paying off debt or taking on more debt is appropriate for them. So stay tuned. I'm Tony Walker. We will be right back. Wondering how much money you'll need to retire? Probably a lot less than you think. I'm retirement specialist Tony Walker, and for over 40 years I've helped thousands of savers determine when to retire and how much money they'll need in retirement, and I can help you too. To see if you can retire now, take advantage of our free 10-minute fiduciary phone call with me, Tony Walker, by logging on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com or call 877-499-9255. Several episodes ago, a Tony in the Trenches prompted me to dedicate a whiteboard segment as to the true cost of borrowing money to buy a second home and the expenses that went along with doing so. Upon watching this episode, one of my own clients sent an email to affirm what I was teaching, and that is this. The cost of getting in the second home is not the real issue. It's all the other ongoing expenses that one doesn't know exist with owning a second home that can come back to bite you. Which is all the more reason having a trained retirement planning firm on your side before making a huge financial decision in retirement can save you a lot of grief and possibly save you a lot of money. Which is why in the studios today I have with us our very own Juanita Jackson to my right and of course Craig Davis. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us this morning.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so both of you, the reason I've got you on the show today, we're coming into this more and more. We're going to talk about this in the next segment, but there's more and more reasons that retirees are borrowing money for various things, and in some cases having to either borrow against their home or borrow money for a second home or moving, downsizing, etc. And I wanted you all to speak to the fact that we assist in that in some ways, but also your background in the mortgage business. So, Juanita, if you could just very briefly tell us your background there before coming to Tony Walker Financial.
So before coming to Tony Walker Financial, I worked both in commercial lending and also in mortgage lending. So licensed in several states and assisted clients with buying first homes, second homes, rental homes, things like that.
And Craig?
Yeah, for 3 years or so, was a licensed loan originator in a number of states. And so same, helping with mortgages for primaries, but also sometimes for second homes or especially vacation kind of homes.
So you all know that world of what these underwriters are looking for. So Juanita, give a typical example of kind of what we're coming across and where we step in to help sometimes to see if people can even qualify for a loan.
So we often get people calling in and they want to do one of two things. They're either downsizing or they're buying a home that they've dreamed of. They're finally ready to do that. Sometimes actually they're caring for grandchildren. They're actually upsizing a little bit. So, or possibly a second home. So a lot of questions with that and how they can sometimes want to leverage their current home to access the cash they need to buy a home quickly for a cash purchase. They might need a proof of funds letter from us. Otherwise, they need to show proof of income. So what they're looking for, what the mortgage lender is looking for is solid proof of income for about 3 years. They're also, of course, looking at debt and debt to income ratios. However, what the calls that I receive, we're really needing to be able to prove to the lender that they are able to pay the mortgage payment.
So how does that work, though? Let's say someone's just retired 6 months ago. Obviously, they don't have the same wages, that income. And even though we're going to start sending them money, possibly even mailbox money, the lenders will usually accept that. How do they look at that? And let's say that transition since retirement and now they're living off fixed assets.
They're wanting to see that you have proof of ongoing income for at least 3 years. Usually they're often already receiving Social Security, so that is counting towards the debt to income ratio, as well as monthly distributions that they're taking from their retirement account. And we can provide proof of that and evidence of how long that will last for them.
And picture yourself back in the underwriting days and you're understanding that, Craig. What else can come up or what might an underwriter look at in this transition when somebody's in retirement and having to qualify for these loans?
A couple of surprises for people. Sometimes you would have credit score issues because people just had not been using credit. They haven't been borrowing money. You haven't used credit in a certain amount of time. Your score could go down. As you're paying off debt, your score actually will go down.
That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
And people will sometimes feel like, well, this is a reflection of me as a person. No, you have sometimes just no score reporting because you're just not using credit at all. And so maintaining a credit score is kind of important. Or people might transition into some sort of retirement part-time work, and those funds might not be countable as income for mortgage purposes.
Let's get back to that, and either one of you can. I hadn't even thought about this. So, I don't really borrow much money anymore. Is a credit card, I won't get into credit scores too much, but is an ongoing credit card, and if you pay it off regularly, does that keep your credit score up high? Or speak to that if you would, Juanita.
Absolutely. So you do want to maintain the ability to have credit, and using a credit card, sometimes actually it can help to raise your score. Also, if you leave a small balance instead of paying it all the way off, it also can leap a score a little bit if we're just barely under trying to qualify. So sometimes that can work quickly to repair credit, showing that you're responsible, you're using credit, you're borrowing, and you're paying back. That's what they want to see.
And speak to the fact of how we at Tony Walker Financial, I think we go above and beyond, quite frankly. I mean, we help with these types of things. We don't get any money for it, but what satisfaction does that give you all personally to know that we're not only helping with their retirement funds, but trying to help people achieve some of their goals and objectives that are really fall outside of what we normally do?
It's exciting to hear when they're getting a new home. We're looking forward to that. We can kind of help them through some of the pitfalls, like waiting too long to get pre-approved and finding the dream home and somebody else actually gets the offer on it. So we help them to be prepared in advance if they'll just call and talk to us about what they're thinking.
Yeah, those are happy calls when people talk about, I'm buying a lake property, my kids and grandkids, we're all going to be able to vacation together. Those are exciting things to be a part of.
Yeah, I like to say those are live well, die broke moments. And I think that just brings so much joy to us to be able to help people with their finances, but also to see them spend and enjoy that money. And in this case, in some cases, the debt is a good thing. I mean, debt is not always bad is the theme of our show. So we just appreciate so much, not only what you do in terms of handling the Schwab accounts and your rollover ability with the 401ks, Craig, but also just your background in the mortgage business. And it's interesting how much this comes up, and while we're a resource if people do have questions, especially our clients. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Folks, we'll be right back.
Our Tony Walker Financial 5-star review comes to us from Judy. Highly pleased with the service and employees here. I feel they truly have my interest as a priority. I was worried about retirement, and I'm not anymore. Tony Walker Financial should teach customer service classes. Anytime I speak with anyone at Tony's offices, they are always so friendly and helpful. Tony Walker Financial has truly made me worry-free. If you'd like to read more of our 5-star reviews, simply log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com.
As we think about the idea of debt and whether debt can be our friend in retirement or possibly our enemy, I thought it might be time well spent to share with you the different times in life that a saver might wish to consider taking on debt, have to take on debt due to changes in their life, and finally, the times that taking on debt may be detrimental to their retirement. So let's start with instances I see in my practice when taking on debt may be to one's advantage or something basically they had not planned on doing in the first place. The first one is purchasing a second home. That's right, folks. There are times when people want to purchase a second home in retirement, and as we've discussed, debt may need to be an issue or at least a consideration. Here's another biggie. Number 2, downsizing. As difficult as this might be, some people are realizing that when they downsize, sometimes the new home they're looking at could be more expensive than the one they've got, or again, there may need to be bridge loans or other things needed in order to get the second home while the first one's still trying to be sold. Again, can be problematic to downsize. Number 3, this happens a lot, purchasing a new car. Now, I'm not crazy about borrowing money for a car, but again, based on cash flow, sometimes it makes sense to borrow money for that car. And then if you're working with a retirement planning firm like Tony Walker Financial, from a cash flow standpoint, assuming you've got one of those tax-infested 401ks out there, we can show you how to cash flow that new car purchase should you decide to borrow money. This is a biggie. Maybe people in retirement are thinking, you know what, we're just going to stay put. We want to stay in our home, but it needs some upgrades. And boy, can those upgrades go up quickly. And again, in some cases, it might make sense to borrow money for the upgrades. Another common thing I'm seeing is assistance with children's needs. And usually we're talking about adult children's here, folks. These children, many of whom would like to be in houses and things like that, or maybe come into some financial hard times, may need money, and you might need to borrow money sometimes to help them. It does come up. Here's another reason for having to borrow money. We had 5 of these we had to deal with recently. These are people in retirement who unfortunately go through a divorce. And let me tell you, if you're going to go through a divorce, there are times when you may have to borrow money to get things shored up. Another reason we see people having to borrow money is death. And again, death is a problem. And this is why, if possible, I know some of you it's too late to get it, but this is why I hate it when people tell people you're not going to need life insurance in retirement and you should just buy term life insurance. In many cases, those people that have permanent life insurance upon the death of a loved one can kind of keep going. Without that life insurance, sometimes they do have to borrow money. So that's a laundry list of things that might be necessary to take on debt and in some cases make sense. Now, the next items, again, this is just in some cases, but these are things I see sometimes people, especially loading up on credit cards and things like this to take on debt that may not be so necessary. Number 1, vacations. And I get it. We all want to take vacations, but you got to be careful, folks. If you're going to throw all that vacation on a credit card, it can rack up some debt really quickly. Another thing is student loans, maybe for yourself or for, again, adult children. Keep in mind, these student loans can be very costly, so I would encourage you to be careful on loading up on student debt unless it's absolutely necessary. Here, how about this one? Purchasing things that maybe we really don't need and or are very overpriced. Kind of like these dance lessons that our own Derek Hudson recently enrolled to take. Stop the presses, Aaron. Derek, come on, what's up with the dance lessons?
Yeah, it's actually called Contra Dancing. They host it every Monday and third Saturday at Highlands Community Ministries here in Louisville. It's really only about $12 to $15 to attend, but your first time is free, and they always have a beginner class at 7:30 with the dance starting at 8 p.m.
All right, number 4, one of the worst debts of all, something that people totally forget about. In fact, they don't even think of it as a lien against their money, but that's the dreaded tax tumor. That's right, folks. That's the amount of money that you will owe the government once you start dragging money out of that tax-infested 401k or IRA. In fact, it's such a huge issue that next week I'm going to dedicate an entire show on this whole issue of the tax tumor, how much you're going to owe the government, and how we at Tony Walker Financial are well equipped to help you mitigate or try to at least reduce the effects of the negative impact of that tax tumor. And finally, and again, I'm getting ready to name number 5, which is medical bills and unforeseen medical issues. I realize this, folks. Sometimes you can't help it. And in fact, one of my attorney buddies said it's one of the leading causes of bankruptcy is this type of debt. But again, this can be really, really detrimental to your retirement. So in summary, here's the point. There are times when debt in retirement can assist in cash flow, and times that it will rob you not only of your joy, but also rob you of your money by creating a cash flow nightmare. But there's only one way to find out if debt in retirement is right for you or not, and that's by taking advantage of something we call the free 10-minute fiduciary phone call. So to take advantage of talking to me, Tony Walker, all you got to do is log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. You're going to click on that Let's Get Started button, or call us anytime at 877-499-9255. Well, what does the Bible have to say about debt? It's going to surprise you where it's going to take us on this journey about debt and sin. I'm Tony Walker. You're watching the Worry-Free Retirement. We will be right back.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Jaggers, and I handle all new annuity business for Tony Walker Financial. A common question the advisors at Tony Walker Financial receive involve clients trying to decide which annuity is right for them and how much to invest in the annuity or annuities they choose to select with us. In order to purchase an annuity product, a client must pass certain guidelines in terms of the amount they can invest with the insurance company issuing the annuity. The reason for this is that the insurance companies issuing the annuities want to be sure that the client has other assets that they can access should the client need money, as most annuities may apply surrender charges to the client should that client need the annuity prior to the end of its term. My job is to be sure the annuity in question meets those guidelines and that the client has access to other funds besides the annuity. As Tony always says, while we love annuities, we want to be sure that our clients do not have all of their money tied up in them.
Want to know what savers were saying right before the stock market crash of 2008?
At our age, we just don't want to be on the roller coaster of the stock market anymore.
I'm not satisfied with my mutual funds at all.
When you work as hard as you have worked, you do want to be able to start enjoying a little bit of that money.
Stop putting your money at risk when you don't have to. Learn how to safeguard more of your retirement savings by logging on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com or call 877-499-9255.
This is Heather Hughes, one of the full-time fiduciaries here at Tony Walker Financial. According to FINRA, annuity sales increased nearly 76% from the years 2020 to 2023. The 2024 sales topped to $432.2 billion. Why are annuities becoming so popular? These increased sales have been driven considerably by the increased demand of lifetime income provided by income riders. Fixed indexed annuities offer market-linked growth plus downside protection with the option of a lifetime income rider. Keep in mind these annuities have complex structures and longer surrender periods, typically between 7 and 10 years. Having a retirement game plan will provide a clear strategy and will prevent you from being locked into an unsuitable annuity. Having a fiduciary guide you is crucial to achieve a balanced income with financial flexibility. If you'd like to see if an annuity is right for you, please visit our website, TonyWalkerFinancial.com, and click Let's Get Started. Or call our office at 877-499-9255.
Our client spotlight today features Mr. Roy Ice here at the Worry-Free Retirement Studios. Mr. Ice, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me here.
Well, first of all, tell us a little bit about your background in terms of your work years.
I worked about a little more than 30 years at Ford Motor Company for the United Auto Workers.
And when did you retire?
In 2023.
And I know you've been with us a couple of years now. When did you begin working with Tony Walker Financial?
It was shortly after retirement, probably January of 23.
And what prompted you back then to contact us?
It was another coworker.
Oh, awesome.
And the coworker said how Tony Walker had been able to help her navigate the 401k waters. She spoke highly of the organization, and she said, Roy, it is worth a look. And I looked, and I liked, and I joined in.
And do you mind me asking a little bit about your past? I know you lost your spouse some time ago.
Yeah.
How has that transition been? How would you explain even the financial and everything else that goes along with losing a spouse?
Well, for 30 years, my wife, Julie, handled everything. Everything from every bill, every savings account, everything. And I was a complete fish out of water. I had no idea how to balance a checkbook or anything. I just knew that I had a pension coming in, and I knew how much money was going out. And I thought that that's the way it was going to be. I was very worried before I came to Tony Walker.
Being employed under a 401k, I'm assuming you had somebody there helping you manage your 401k, didn't you?
Yeah, well, the company had resources available to manage those for us. It was completely elective. It was fee-based. But other than someone managing that, you really don't have any more information than someone who isn't being managed. You don't have that information. So you have to put hope and faith and trust into the people that are doing it, that your market value or whatever your holdings increase in value. But I think at the end of the day, it just, to me, I lacked those resources. And then that's what Tony Walker offered me, that the resources were there. The books were written. The proof was in the pudding, and everything was laid out for me. And anybody can read through it and just know that it's the right thing to do.
And I think you were under the impression, like a lot of workers, that just because you were under the age of 60 and wanted to retire, that really that 401k, to your understanding, was kind of off limits. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's it's kind of ingrained into your head. If you hit it before 59 and a half, you're going to get a 10% penalty from the feds. It was eye-opening when I came here and learned that, I can avoid that penalty and draw and subsidize my pension and live an even more healthier retirement.
So I was going to say, how's it been since you retired? Is cash flow, like it says, cash flow been good? Has it surprised you how little it really needs to get along in retirement?
What surprises me is that my concern that I had on finances went away. I don't focus on the finances. I know that if I have one of life's curves are thrown at me, I need a washer and dryer, or I need some work on my vehicle, I know that it's there. I know that I'm not going to stress out and have to, save a couple months or whatever to get it done.
And speak to people who are under the age of 60. There's a lot of changes going on in society, Mr. Ice. What would you say to somebody that, let's say, is in that 55 to 60-year-old age range, and they really just assume they cannot retire? What would be your suggestion to them?
Well, I would say before you make that your final decision, that you at least get all the information that you can. I think Tony Walker Financial is a great resource for that give you a better understanding of if you can, if you can't, because there are so many things that we just don't know about. We just don't know about them, Tony. We work, we put money in the 401k, and then we think when we're 59 and a half, it's going to be there and we'll draw on it. There's a lot of information that the normal, regular working Joe doesn't know. And that's where you guys come in.
Well, Mr. Ice, we appreciate your business, and thank you so much for your trust and confidence in Tony Walker Financial.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you very much.
Looking for an advisor you can trust? Schedule your free phone call with Tony at TonyWalkerFinancial.com or call 1-877-499-9255.
Welcome back to the Worry-Free Retirement with the money missionary himself, Tony Walker.
Assuming you read your Bible with any regularity, you've probably noticed that the Bible does say a lot about money, and it says also quite a bit about debt. And while much of the reference to debt involves money and possessions and all the worry that comes along with owing money plus paying interest back to the person who lent it to you, the word debt is also used to describe the burden that sin can place on us when we venture outside the boundaries that God would have us to live in. And isn't that really the biggest consequence to debt? So where does this notion of debt and sin coincide? Well, the most obvious use of the word debt to describe sin is found in our Lord's Prayer in Matthew 6:12, where Jesus states that we are to ask God to forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. Folks, he's not talking about debt and money. He's talking about the debt and the terms of the forgiveness of our sins. King David, a man after God's own heart, struggled with getting outside the boundaries of God and drifting into sin. We see this in Psalm 19:13, where David prays this, "Keep back thy servant also from presumptuous sins." Based on our topic today, those presumptuous sins might be needless debt and all the worry they create. And as Webster's tells us, presumptuous is the act of simply overstepping bounds or taking liberties. For David, his fear was he could easily leave the boundaries God had established for him and, drift right into sin. Paul gives us the same warning of leaving the boundaries of God, where in Colossians 3:5, he lists all the presumptuous sins one can stand when Christians drift away from our Lord. Notice the one that stands front and center as we think about crossing boundaries of borrowing money we cannot afford to pay back, or debt that in this case reveals what we really want. Paul refers to this as covetousness. Some would call it being greedy. Spurgeon sums up presumptuous sins this way: "What might the best of us not do if it were not for the boundaries that the Lord sets upon us both in providence and in grace?" In other words, if a godly man like David can be tempted to leave the comforting boundaries of depending on God, guess what, folks? So can you and I. And while I firmly believe that there's nothing evil about debt, why we take on debt sometimes might reveal what might be deemed sinful because of why we took on debt in the first place. My advice, don't be afraid of debt, but if you are going to borrow money, especially in retirement, be sure you have plenty of assets to pay it off if things go off the rails. And for goodness sakes, above all else, be sure the debt you have or thinking of taking on is not causing more of your money to go out the back door than it is bringing in the front door. Amen? Well, speaking of getting some good advice on whether the debt you have or about to take on in retirement is good debt or bad debt, I've got a good idea. Why not talk to someone who has been advising people on retirement for over 20 years? Someone who has personally met in person with over 20,000 savers and overseen more than 5,000 written game plans. An advisor who owns a retirement planning firm full of specialists whose only mission is to help savers worry less about money. Well, I'm Tony Walker, and if you are retired or maybe planning on retiring in the near future, we need to talk. And we've made this so easy to do, and best of all, there is no obligation on your part at all. It's called the free 10-minute fiduciary phone call. To get started talking to me, all you do is log on to TonyWalkerFinancial.com. You're going to click on that little Let's Get Started button, and we will arrange that phone call right away. Internet not your thing? No worries. We have operators standing by 24/7 who can take your call and arrange the phone call at a later time. That number, 877-499-9255. Well, we hope you've enjoyed today's program. Guess what? Part 2 comes up next week, and this is going to surprise you. We're talking about all of the debt buried inside your 401k plan. Good stuff coming your way, but you remember between now and then, if all else fails, you be worry-free and you make it a good one.